Today we're going to be talking about viral diseases. And in order to talk about viral diseases, we're going to have to talk about viruses. So viruses are a very interesting topic in biology, in microbiology. Depending on who you talk to, you're going to get some different points of view on viruses. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that as we get into it. But a virus is something that we have all gotten viruses. You've had, the common cold. You've had a flu. You've had something in your lifetime that was a virus. And it's not like another infection that you would get. For example, if you've had strep throat, then we're calling it strep throat because we know the particular type of bacteria that you're infected with is a streptococcus. And so we give you an antibiotic and we treat that. That antibiotic kills the streptococcus bacteria and you no longer have strep throat. With a viral infection, you're being infected by a virus, and so there's really no killer for that, right? An antibiotic is anti-life. We're killing a bacteria. With a virus, we're really relying on your body's immune system to rid the body of that virus because we can't really give you a medicine that's going to kill something that's not alive. And that's the problem. That's kind of the trick there with viruses, is that they are not technically alive. And so killing them becomes somewhat of more of a tricky situation. So there's all different types of viruses. Viruses can infect all different types of organisms. They can infect bacteria, they can infect plants and animals. It's not just something that people get, right? It's not just something that's unique to humans. So viruses, as I mentioned, they can cause colds, they can cause the flu, they can cause warts, diseases, measles, AIDS. There's lots of different things that viruses can transmit. Not all viruses cause disease, and so we'll see that as we go through that not all viruses are responsible for nasty things. And so, like I said, they're not all bad, and they're not all just specific to humans. Those are the ones we more commonly hear about. So a virus in its most simple form is either DNA or RNA, and that is surrounded and protected by a protein coat, which is called a capsid. And that's essentially all a virus is. Okay, it's just some type of genetic information either in the form of RNA or DNA, and then it's surrounded by this capsid. So why are viruses harmful? Well, kind of going back to why viruses, one of the criteria that means that they're not alive, viruses cannot reproduce on their own. So one of the qualifications, for something that's to be alive is that you have to be able to reproduce on your own. A virus cannot do that. So a virus is going to rely on your cells or the cells of whatever organism it's infecting to reproduce. Okay? So what a virus is going to do to your cells is a virus is going to enter your body one way or another. You're going to inhale it, or you're going to touch something that, somebody that had a virus touched or coughed on, perhaps, right? So maybe someone coughed on a surface, you came along there, you didn't know that they had coughed on that surface, you put your hand down, and then your hand goes to your mouth, and now that virus is there. When the virus gets inside your cells, okay, it is essentially going to take over the machinery of your cells. It's going to rearrange your cell and turn it into a virus factory. Okay, so think of it as like if we have a factory that has all the raw materials to make bicycles, right? And then someone sneaks in at night and rearranges all the machines. We're still using the same raw materials, and the next day, instead of producing bicycles, this factory now produces guns. Okay, that's kind of how a virus works. It takes your machinery inside your cells, and instead of producing proteins that you need and producing the products that your body needs, it now only produces viruses. And so that's why it's damaging to your cells, because these cells that are infected with a virus are now going to reproduce nothing but viruses. They're going to produce so many viruses inside a cell that the cell will actually rupture and explode. And when that does, every virus that's been created is going to go out and find a new cell and do the exact same thing. So if let's say you get one virus inside you, okay, and that takes over one cell, it's going to make, let's say, 1,000 copies of itself. Right? And then those 1,000 are going to all go out and do the exact same thing, and each one of those cells is going to produce another 1,000 viruses. So this is why a virus can hit you pretty hard and pretty fast. You can start your day, maybe you feel perfectly fine, or maybe you feel a little groggy. As the day goes on, a couple hours later, starting to feel a little uncomfortable. Another hour passes and you feel like you just want to crawl into bed and never get out. That's because a virus can spread really rapidly. Once it starts replicating and once it starts that process, lots of different cells are going to become infected, and so your body is now going to start responding. It's going to start, releasing. It's going to start going into that inflammation mode. A fever is going to spike. Your immune system's on alert. All of those, that inflammation response is now going to be happening because your body knows there's a foreign invader in there that's not supposed to be in there. Not all viruses work that way, but a lot of them do, and that's kind of like just how, it's the strength of the virus, it's the virility. Some of them can just hit you really, really quickly, and then they take you down pretty fast in terms of what you're able to how you're able to cope with your day and that sort of thing. So. There's lots of different viral diseases. AIDS is a disease which is caused by the virus HIV. The flu is caused by influenza. Measles is caused by the morbillivirus. And then we even have some links to cancer through hepatitis B and that sort of thing. So lots of different viruses out there. So who do the viruses infect? As I've mentioned before, plants can get viruses. One of the more common ones is the tobacco mosaic virus, and that's a virus that gets in the tobacco plant. And so, when we're growing tobacco, that's something that the tobacco farmers really have to watch out for. Bacteria have their own viruses, which are called bacteriophages. And they are viruses that only infect bacteria. And then, of course, we have lots and lots of different viruses that infect animals and things like that. The common cold, the flu, those types of things. A lot of people always ask, well, if all animals get colds and flus and viruses and things like that, then how come my dog never gets sick? And the answer to that really is that the dog's immune system is better at handling those types of things than you. Dogs eat a lot of, they're in contact. Their world is sensed through their nose, and they eat a lot of things, and their system is just kind of set up. It doesn't mean that they don't get them, but more often, we're a little bit more sensitive to that just because of who we are and how we're designed. So. You normally don't see your dog just walking around with the sniffles. So, but it's possible. So let's look at some of the defining properties of a virus and why most people categorize them as non-living. So viruses, as I've mentioned before, they cannot reproduce on their own. They have to have a host that they invade. And so essentially they're kind of a parasite, right? They live off of that host and require that host. They do have some form of genetic material, either RNA or DNA, and then they're going to direct that new cell to create copies of itself. And then, of course, those new copies are going to go out and find new cells to infect and just start the process all over. Viruses do not breathe. They do not metabolize. They do not grow. They simply reproduce within their host. And it's that reproduction of a virus that causes people to be sick. Viruses are incredibly, incredibly small. They are smaller than bacterial cells. A lot of them are just a little bit bigger than proteins. So they're very, very small. And as I said before, they take over the machinery of a cell. And this is the reason why we call a virus, and it's also why we call a computer virus a virus. When you give a computer a code, it is just simply going to read that code, and it's going to execute whatever the code tells it to do. Right? So someone writes a code, you give that to the computer executes it. When a computer gets a virus, the computer is not going to evaluate whether that code is good or bad. It is simply going to execute that code. Even if that means destroying the computer's motherboard or releasing sensitive information or whatever the case may be, the computer is not sentient, so it's not going to decide that that's a bad thing. The same thing is true inside your cells. That once the virus takes over and reprograms your DNA is not going to say, hey, this is really bad. It's going to destroy this cell. It can't make that decision. So it's just going to execute the code just like the computer would, and ultimately it leads to the destruction of the cell. But that's how the virus works. It tricks the cell into saying, hey, these are your new instructions. Follow them, okay? And the cell does to the cell's demise. Not all viruses are bad and cause disease. Some of them can actually be beneficial. We can actually use some viruses to transport DNA and RNA and use that in gene therapy. So, because a virus infects a cell, if we can put good DNA, what we want, into a virus and then allow that virus to infect the cell, now we can start talking about changing the genetic makeup of that cell. So there's some possibilities there for genetic disorders and that sort of thing. And so with gene therapy, as time goes on, we may be able to manipulate, the genetics of certain cells within the body and actually maybe change or correct something that existed there before. So viruses, it sounds all doom and gloom, but they actually, because of what they do and because of them not being alive, we can actually take advantage of that. So viruses are found, everywhere in all organisms, and for the most part, when we think of viruses, we think of the bad things that they do, but they also have the potential to bring some good things to organisms.